Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Diriye Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 1, A Lifetime in Preparation, India 1896 to 1965, Chapter 9, A Resident of Vrindavan. So yesterday we studied how he described Vrindavan, the beauty of Vrindavan, and now Prabhupada is moving to Vrindavan. He is in the train. The train arrived at Mathura. Abhay stepped down with his luggage and looked around, noting the recently constructed Mathura Junction building. Proceeding through the gate and out of the station, he found a Tanga driver, agreed on the fare, and started for Keshi Ghat. For half a mile, the wobbling horse-drawn cart followed the road between the tracks and the railway yard. At the main road, they turned left, passed under a railroad bridge, and entered an open market. Piles of fruits, vegetables, and grains were displayed on the ground, their vendors sitting beside them, bartering and measuring while customers milled about. The women of Mathura, dressed in brightly colored saris, yellows, greens, pinks, and purples, moved busily in the market. The vehicular traffic consisted mostly of bullock carts, the drivers often squatting on the wooden yokes between the shoulders of their animals, whipping alternatively, one ox and then the other with a length of rope joined to a wooden hand. Although this was the most populated area in the trip to Vrindavan, compared to Delhi, it seemed simple and rural. The sun was high, but the Tanga's top provided a partial shelter, and the summer's heat had passed. Beyond the bazaar, the road curved to the right, and Abhay saw the nearby white domes of the massive sandstone mosque marking Krishna Janmasthan, the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Centuries ago, invading Muslims had destroyed the large Krishna temple and created the mosque in its stead. And now directly in front of the mosque stood a newer, smaller Krishna temple. They approached a three-way junction, New Delhi, Central Mathura, and Vrindavan. The driver struck the horse with its whip, and the Tanga proceeded along the Vrindavan road, edging through a herd of white cows, the herdsman walking among them, carrying his stick. The road was busy with Tangas and slow creaking ox carts loaded with market commodities and pulled by squat, black water buffalo. A string of small spindle-legged donkeys carried oversized loads of firewood and sandbags. Although much had changed in Abhay's life since he had come here to see his spiritual master during the parikrama years ago, Vrindavan had remained the same. He felt he had done the best thing in coming here, leaving the heat, the traffic, and fumes, the human passions of Delhi. It was a natural relief. Yet even as he felt transcendental emotions of Vrindavan, impressions of his months of preaching in Delhi lingered in his mind, the city street and himself going from place to place with his back to Godheads. Life in Delhi had been constant, vigorous preaching. Now he was more than 60 years old, but he was not coming to Vrindavan to retire. He had retired from household responsibilities, but not from his responsibilities of making back to Godhead, as popular and sophisticated as illustrated weekly. He would live in Vrindavan and commute to Delhi, but he would never stop preaching. The sight of taller trees signaled the precincts of Vrindavan as a thin horse trotted along, perhaps a police station and water trough for animals. On either side appeared the garden courtyards of private estates and ashrams. Fragile white malati flowers, golden marigolds, frangipani trees, red hibiscus trees of sorrow, and many other flowers and trees, some known only in Vrindavan, bloomed forth in the brilliant sunlight. The Radha Govinda temple loomed fortress-like on its left, and opposite in the distance the high rising tower of the Ranganath temple. They entered narrow streets, tighter and busier places with markets and city dwellings. And then it became quieter again. At the end of the narrow street by the Yamuna river near the Keshi bathing ghat, stood the small and beautifully ornate entrance of the Vanchi Gopalji temple, a narrow three-storied building with three domes and many decorated arches. After stepping over the curbside drain and walking up three marble steps, Abhay entered the front door, the driver following him, carrying the luggage. Once inside, Abhay removed his shoes and entered the courtyard, which was open to the sky through a metal grate, on which a few birds sat 2 floors above. A column of sunlight lit one side of the courtyard, where a potted tulsi sat atop a pillar. The temple seemed cool and quiet. Adjacent to the courtyard was the deity room, its doors locked shut. Overhead was a mezzanine with rooms whose entrances were visible from the courtyard. A few saris and strips of cloth hung on the improvised clothesline. Mahant Gopal, the temple pujari whom Abhay had known since 1954, greeted him cheerfully. He was about the same age as Abhay and had long grey hair and unruly beard. Although Abhay's attire was modest, he appeared well dressed compared with Gopal, who wore only a coarse dhoti. Gopal led Abhay upstairs. Coming out onto the roof, Abhay smiled to see again the wonderful vista. Barely 100 yards away, he could see Yamuna, not only the immediate patch of water flowing before him, but to his left and right, a broad curving sheet of river shimmering in the afternoon sun. There were sand deltas, herds of cows and buffaloes grazing, the flat, grassy banks of the Yamuna and plain and trees as far as the eyes could see. And in the opposite direction was the town of Vrindavan, marked by dozens of temple spires and domes. Abhay's room, the only one on the roof, was small, with narrow double doors and barred windows. Sitting on the apartment's roof, monkeys with their tiny offsprings sat watching, unalarmed. Just outside the door, a 2-foot-high cement pyramid signified that the temple deity was directly beneath. Abhay entered the room. Through the barred windows, he could see the palace at Keshi Ghat, the venerable tower of the Gopinath temple, and beyond the uninterrupted flat river, the green banks and the sky. After acquainting Abhay with the details of the room, the small kerosene burner, the rope and bucket for drawing bathwater from the well to the roof, Gopal meticulously produced a government-stamped rental agreement. Abhay wrote a short paragraph declaring himself a disciple of the late Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada and attesting to his renting the room at 5 rupees per month. Both parties signed. After his bath, Abhay took prasadam and rested. When he heard the bells ringing in the temple below, he went down to see the deities. Gopal, who had been the temple's pujari for many years and had seen its reconstruction in 1923, had told Abhay that the temple deity, Vanchi Gopalji, had been installed 350 years before by Mahant Prahlad Das of the Nimbarka Vaishnava Sampradaya. Gopal himself had installed the deity of Radharani. Vanchi Gopalji, standing in a graceful threefold bending form and holding his flute, was very appealing. He was 3 feet tall and of black marble. Radharani, slightly shorter, was of brass. They were simply dressed in rough white cotton and illuminated by the dim glow of a kerosene lamp. Abhay could see that they were being cared for, but because of poverty, there was no opulence. He returned to the roof as the sun was setting over the town of Vrindavan, having the entire roof's walkway to himself. Abhay walked and chanted japa, enjoying the cooling early evening breeze from the Yamuna. Occasionally, a solitary boat would pass on the calm waters of the Yamuna, and a devotee somewhere unseen could be heard chanting evening prayers at Keshi Ghat. He felt pleased with this location in the heart of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. He was not a newcomer spending his first day in a strange town. Everything here was already familiar and dear. As Vrindavan was Krishna's abode, Abhay was Krishna's servant, the servant of the six Goswamis, the servant of his spiritual master. He felt at home. As day turned to twilight, temple bells rang throughout the town. Abhay walked to the western side of the roof and looked into the city of thousands of temples. The Govindji temple, the Rangnath temple, and thousands of smaller temples were having their Sandhya Harti and Kirtan, glorifying Lord Krishna. Abhay responded to the sights and sounds of Vrindavan as only a pure devotee could. His thoughts and emotions were full of appreciation and awareness of Krishna, Krishna's devotee, and Krishna's land. Naturally, he began to think of preaching, hankering for others to know the intimate peace and ecstasy of Vrindavan. Others to know the intimate peace and ecstasy of Vrindavan. Ecstasy for sure, but now with so much of devotees moving to Vrindavan or visiting Vrindavan, which is good, everybody should. The peace is gone, that is for sure. So much of traffic is there, crowd is there. But this is what Prabhupada actually has done. He brought so many people to Vrindavan. So many. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was inviting all souls to join him in his eternal abode. Yet even in India, few understood. And outside India, people knew nothing of Vrindavan or of the Yamuna or of what it means to be free of material desires. Why shouldn't people all around the world have this? This was the abode of peace, yet no one knew anything of it, nor were people interested. But this is what they were actually hankering for. Abhay thought of back to Godhead and how, by Krishna's grace, he might expand his preaching beyond India to the whole world. His God brothers, it would have been better if they had all worked together in the Gaudiya Math, but many of them were at least keeping the regulative principles. None of them, however, seemed to be doing much beyond maintaining a temple here, an ashram there, worshipping a deity, eating and sleeping. But there was so much more to be done in broadcasting the glories of Vrindavan. Abhay chanted and thought of Krishna. Gradually, he turned to his task of producing the October issue of Back to Godhead, due to be printed shortly in Delhi. He had a deadline to keep. The next morning before sunrise, the residents of Vrindavan were austere, bathing in the Yamuna, performing puja to the deities, reciting mantras. But Abhay was awoke even before most, writing in stillness beneath the light in his rooftop room. As he wrote diligently in English, scriptural references appeared and took their place within convincing arguments. For hours he wrote, page after page in an exercise book, until gradually the chirping of awakening birds signaled the end of the dark night's stillness. Soon the sun would rise. See, he was fixed. Prabhupada was so fixed in writing. Right now he's writing this magazine, Back to Godhead, but later he starts writing the books. And he would write at night when everybody would be sleeping, it was quiet, calm, and that is when he would write. Amazing. Although at this time there is nothing, no ashram, nothing he had, but still he was determined. Keeping to his regular schedule, he put aside his writing and began chanting japa, staying in his room, uttering the Hare Krishna mantra in a soft, deep voice. Even before the first traces of light in the sky, before the river was visible, a few Babajis reciting prayers made their way through the streets, heading for the Yamuna. By 4 a.m., gongs and temple bells throughout the city heralded the Mangala Arti of the deity. Abhay continued chanting alone for another hour. Then he prepared to bathe, lowering the bucket on its long rope and hauling water up to the rooftop. It was light when he went out. His bead bag around his neck, a few copies of Back to Godhead in his hand. Turning right at the temple door, he walked a tight, crooked lane past alleys, dirt paths, and cross lanes which interlaced in a winding network. There were no shops in the area, only silent buildings, many of them hundreds of years old. The neighborhood was serene. Behind closed shutters, someone played on wooden clackers and sang Hare Krishna softly. At a crossroad where dark women filled brass water pots from a well, Abhay turned left onto a street lined with small, open porches. On either side, he saw ornate temple architecture. One entrance marked by two stone lions, another by a carved elephant with teeth like a tiger's. A brick and mortar wall was crumbling with age. Soon Abhay arrived at the Radha Raman temple, established almost 500 years before by Gopal Bhatta Goswami, one of Lord Chaitanya's chief followers. Here, residents of Vrindavan coming and going according to their vows, following a strict schedule that allowed not a moment's delay, making their daily visit to various temples. So yes, this is what happens in morning in Vrindavan. They just want to go take darshan of so many temples, and every temple has a schedule. So this time, this darshan will be open, and from that time to that time, darshan will remain open and close. So devotees practically run in the streets of Vrindavan in the early morning to cover as many temples as possible. It's amazing scene actually in the morning. Abhay entered and stood amidst a group of worshippers, viewing the deity of Krishna, Radha Raman. The deity wearing a fresh garland of flowers, his enchanting black form, adorned with bright silks and jewels, appeared very opulent. Knowing the priests of Radha Raman to be respected, learned Sanskritists, some of whom also read English, Abhay had brought with him a few copies of Back to Godhead. He met Vishwambar Goswami, a young priest in his 30s, who after the death of his father had left his law practice and taken over some of the temple management. The temple was run under a caste Goswami system, and thus for 500 years, Vishwambar's ancestors had handed down charge of the temple. Although Vishwambar had met many sadhus, he was immediately struck by Abhay's gentle and humble demeanor. He accepted the copies of Back to Godhead and sat and talked with Abhay. Abhay then continued along Vrindavan's winding lanes to visit another temple, Radha Damodar. He passed old Babajis and women carrying water, a commercial shop beside an open porch where people worshipped a Shivlinga, monkeys sitting atop a high concrete wall and ranging from roof to roof, ledge to ledge, chattered and gestured as Abhay walked beneath. As the morning progressed, barefoot children had begun to appear more frequently, playing within the open doorways. As he walked along, chanting Japa, his right hand in his bead bag, his lips moving softly, hardly anyone in Vrindavan knew him. But as an elderly, cultured Bengali gentleman, he did not seem an unusual sight. He was a religious Babu in a town devoted entirely to religion. Abhay would regularly visit Vrindavan's important temples, and afterwards he would shop, returning to his room around 11 with vegetables for cooking. Using the kerosene burner and a 3-tiered cooker, he would cook rice, potatoes, and sometimes sabji. He would also cook chapatis. He would take only one meal a day at noon, and in the evening a cup of milk. When he did not have time to cook, he would take the prasadam of the deity. After lunch, he would nap for 15 minutes and then write. He rarely received visitors, but stayed alone, writing. Just before sunset, he would again go out visiting temples. At Keshi Ghat, he would pass by sadhus sitting alone here and there, facing the Yamuna. The river itself was little trafficked. Sometimes a boat or two slowly moving on the river's placidity. Sometimes a fish splashed in the water, or a bird winged along the river, watchful. Keshi Ghat was quiet and beautiful, especially after the sun had relented for the day. Sadhus would hail Abhay on sight with Vrindavan's common greeting, Jai Radhe, and Abhay would return his Hare Krishna. But now that area is so crowded, so crowded. And the traffic and people and so many boats are there in Yamuna in that elevation. They take people around. But it's good. So many people are visiting Vrindavan. When in the evening he walked through town, he would find himself amidst the vibrations of one kirtan after another. In the temples of Krishna, Ram, Chaitanya, Narsimha, or Shiva, in ashram halls, in homes, even amongst groups walking on the streets, there would be kirtan. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. He would often see Bengali widows gathered together in a hall. Thousands of them lived in ashrams in Vrindavan, staying together with few wants, wearing dull white saris, keeping their hair cut short, never leaving Vrindavan, even for Mathura, wanting only to stay in Vrindavan, to die in Vrindavan, chanting Hare Krishna. So that is the aim of so many widows. There are so many, still so many widows in Vrindavan. And not just Vrindavan, at Radhakund also you see so many, and other places, Govardhan also. They just don't want to leave Vrindavan. They just want to die. A man would sit playing mridanga and leading a chant while a group of widows clapped their hands unevenly, responding in their childlike voices. The drum, the clapping, the singers, unpolished but earnest, made a sweet sound in the evening. As Abhay walked, no sooner would the sound of one kirtan fade than another would rise loudly before him and then fade behind him as another rose to meet him, a temple bell ringing formidably, intermingling with the drums, cymbals, and chorus of another group, or a single person passing nearby singing his own Radhe, Radhe. Even the greetings were kirtan, Jai Radhe, Haribol, as faces passed, as carts clattered by, as men joked or made their last transaction of the day in the market, and as stray cows made their way home, their bells clanging around their necks, somehow everything was in connection with Krishna. And as Abhay returned to the secluded Vanshi Gopalji temple, there also he would hear kirtans, only more private, perhaps only a husband and wife in their room, the man playing mridanga and singing one line of bhajan, his wife singing in response. Vrindavan was not ordinary. Every singer sounded sweet, in his own way an expert melodist, and everyone sang of Krishna. Krishna was present in every occasion and event. Srila Prabhupada, the glories of Krishna nobody can understand. Similarly, Vrindavan, the land which is known as Vrindavan, also has unlimited potency. When you go to Vrindavan, you will find unlimited potency of spiritual atmosphere. Still, if you go to Vrindavan, you will see so many saints and sages. Still, they are worshipping Vrindavan Dham. As Lord Krishna is worshipable, similarly, his place, Vrindavan, is as good as Krishna. It's also worshipable. Commuting became difficult. He would take the morning train into Delhi and, having nowhere to stay, return to Vrindavan the same night. That didn't give him much time in Delhi, and it was expensive. At first, he had stayed with Mr. Gupta, a pious gentleman who studied the Gita regularly and afforded sadhus a place to stay. Abhay had explained to Mr. Gupta about his back to Godhead and his desires to preach in the West. It had been a good arrangement, and Abhay had kept to himself writing. But in time, another sadhu took the room. Even with his minimal personal expenses, it was difficult to raise enough donations to cover traveling, printing, and mailing. Giving copies of Back to Godhead away wasn't difficult, and he was doing that in Vrindavan. But working alone, writing, editing, selling, soliciting donations was too much. The printer, Mr. Jain, was amazed, wondering why a person would put himself through such difficulties, printing a paper he couldn't afford. Srila Prabhupada, I worked for Back to Godhead day and night. In the beginning, when I was a householder, I did not care if somebody paid or not paid. I used to distribute liberally. But when I left my household life and I was living alone, sometimes in Vrindavan and sometimes in Delhi, or sometimes traveling for pushing on BTG, they were very hard days. After his 12th consecutive fortnightly edition, the issue for November 20th, 1956, Abhay ran out of money. Mr. Jain had to throw up his hands, saying he couldn't print simply out of friendship. Abhay returned to Vrindavan, where he spent his time writing but with no plan for publication. It was because people were not interested in becoming Krishna consciousness, because they had no time, that Back to Godhead had failed financially. Certain sadhus in India were celebrated and influential, but Abhay was not amongst them. Of course, the uncompromising preaching he had learned from his spiritual master, the chopping technique in which he openly criticized revered politicians and holy men, was not likely to win him favor and patronage. Don't flatter, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said. Speak the truth. And if Krishna is pleased, then you will come out successful. Money will come. And Abhay had firm faith in this. That was his outstanding asset, his faith in his spiritual master. He was sure that by following Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he would receive his blessings and the blessings of Lord Chaitanya. Although for the last 2 years he had followed any path that had opened as far as it had led, he had remained one-pointed, aimed at serving the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was confident. Sooner or later, he would obtain substantial backing. He would find a sympathetic audience. Sincere workers would join him. So, Krishna really tests. The stronger one is, or more determined one is, the greater the test would be. And he's really testing Prabhupada. We can only imagine the austerities he went through, the pain, the struggle. How easy it is for us. Prabhupada has made it. How easy it is. We don't have to write any articles, run around to get it printed and then distribute. Like when we used to go for book distribution, all we had to do, order BBT, send us the books, we just carry the books and distribute. And people know ISKCON very well now, so they would just buy. And we just come back and give the records, give the money, and that's it. But look at Prabhupada, he had to do so much. A letter came to Abhay in Vrindavan from his disciple Acharya Prabhakar Mishra, and it gave Abhay an idea. Acharya Prabhakar, who was in Bombay working as secretary of the Sanskrit department at the Bharati Vidya Bhavan, invited Srila Bhaktivedanta Prabhu to join him there for preaching together, just as in old days. The founder director of the Bharati Vidya Bhavan was Governor K.M. Munshi, the same governor whose wife had pressured Abhay to give up the Radha Memorial in Jhansi. But Acharya Prabhakar, having recently established a friendship with the governor, intimated to Abhay that the governor might be willing to help. Thus, in January 1957, after assuring Mahant Gopal that he would return and that he would send 5 rupees a month for his room, Abhay traveled to Bombay. So, I guess we can stop here, read tomorrow what happens next. But it's amazing struggle that Prabhupada went through. It's amazing. Okay, see anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.